All right, let's go. And we're starting. We are going to create a new project in Unity. I'm going to use 2021.3.45. That's the LTS for long-term support, right? And we're going to work with animations today, 2D, and it's going to work with sprites. And we're going to create our own object as well. So I don't care what you call your project name. I'm going to call mine May 25, 2026. 2025. Oh boy. Animations. Today is the 26th. That's what I was thinking. And don't forget, when we have a project name, if it's longer than like 86 characters, then Unity won't let us save it, by the way. And that includes the location as well. So you have to total up all of these and make sure it's less than 86 or something like that, which typically isn't an issue unless you do it on a network, which has, like this location is not just c./users. It could be something even as simple as, like, for example, if I go here, that has the whole name, Michael/Hillsborough County. That whole thing gets put into the name of the document as well. And that can definitely hinder you. So something that's cool too that I noticed is the Unity Hub's been updated for me, and it now connects to the Unity Cloud. So you can connect your project and you can edit it across multiple computers, which is really cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create that project. And this is where we have to wait. It's going to load up. And I'm going to switch my screen for a little bit while it loads. I'm going to talk about something. So in the Unity manual, you'll see over here, and then, remember, I provided this with the links in the text file. So if you're wondering where to go to that text file that I provided, which has these links on it. And I'll put these links as well in the description of the YouTube video. So we're in the first one, working with sprites. So remember that the Unity, let's call it the exam, it takes a lot of questions straight from the Unity manual. So it's possible that it'll have a question, sprites are a type of 2D asset that you can use in your Unity project. That could literally be on the exam. I don't know if it is, but it's very possible. And if they highlight it as asset, to me that says, hey, you know what they might do with the question? They might change this word, or they might have it as like a fill in the blank, or it might be like a true false. Sprites are a type of 2D model that you can use in your project. Nope, models are 3D. Assets are 2D, or sprites are 2D, models are 3D, right? Like, there's different ways that they could ask this question. So this is why I always like to go back to the manual. Let's look at it, and let's definitely use it to our advantage. So you'll see that in the course modules that you'll have with the tutorials that I give you guys. So here's the importing a 2D character sprite sheet. In the end, there's actually a set of notes that the kids have to use, and it comes straight from the Unity manual. So 9 slicing is a blank technique, allowing you to blank an image. It involves blanking. So all of this right here, you're going to see that it's all right here inside of the manual. 9 slicing is a 2D technique which allows you to reuse an image. So that would be right here. It's a 2D technique which allows you to reuse an image. And that would also go along with the next part of the assignment, part 2, which is import and create animations. And then there's even the follow-up to go along with it, right? So with the assignments comes guided notes, and those guided notes come from the manual itself, this right here. And, and I've taken sections from it and given it to you. So you guys are with me now, and I'll point out some of these important parts with you as well. So when working with sprites, we have to understand that what a component is. And now that my Unity is up and running, we can go ahead and get to it. And I am now over here. So I'm going to go ahead and change my screen. I like my hierarchy to be over here. And here we go. So I've created a brand new scene. What I need to do is I need to import some assets. Now, Unity manual tells you this itself. There are two ways to import assets, and these are questions that could also be on the exam. One way to import an asset is simply to drag and drop it over. Now, I don't like that it's in my main assets folder. I like to create new folders, and in here have my sprites, and I'll put my 9 slicing sprite in here. So one way is to drag and drop from a folder into the project menu. And I'm gonna go real quick. I'm gonna change my scene so you guys can see. I'm now in the Unity manual. I went to the next page. Importing images as sprites, there's two ways. You can import into your project. You can place them directly into your assets folder. That's what we just did, drag and drop them from our computer into the assets folder or into the project folder. That's how they could change that question. You could import images into the Unity editor itself. So two ways, drag and drop or import. Okay, let's do that. So when you're in your folder, right click it and you can import a new asset. You just have to know its location. And the one that I am downloading, I think, is in my Unity folder, 9 slicing example. I believe I had one more that I wanted to import, and that was my floor. I'll drag and drop the floor into it as well. And boom, we are good to go. Okay, so we click on a sprite. You'll notice that when you click on the sprite, on the right side is the inspector. And don't forget that the inspector is super important. It has all the properties for our objects that we're working with, or our assets in this case. Notice how this one's 397 by 397. Now something that's important is when we look at different sprites, 397, 525, this one's 16 by 16. I'm just gonna go ahead and drag these into my scene. You're gonna see that the sizes aren't going to be, well, I guess intuitive, right? 397, 525, 16 by 16. So what's happening is, do we have a question?
Yeah, are you recording or no?
Yes, I am.
Okay, just making sure. All right, cool.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to ask questions though. All right. Anyways, so it does make sense in that this is 390. This is basically 400 by 400, right? It's slightly smaller than this one, which is 525. This one over here, which is the floor, is 16 by 16. So you can see it does reflect the sizes when you import it. Something that kind of threw me off initially was when I would download sprite sheets and I would have like a floor here, and I was trying to make a game. And I was like, all right, well, I have this tile map, and why are my tiles so small, right? And why is everything else so much larger? Is there any way that I can change the way that Unity, imports this? And that's where I discovered this pixels per unit up here. And if you just say it to yourself, pixels per unit, that's how many. If you think about it, if I were to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, eventually this square is made up of a single unit inside of Unity. Well, it has so many pixels per that unit, right? That makes sense. So like, for example, this floor, let's delete it real quick. If you look at this floor, it's still 100 pixels per unit, whereas these guys are same thing, but these are much larger. So if you wanted to start equalizing things, you could start changing around with the pixels per unit. So you could say, well, let's do 16 pixels per unit. Let's apply it, drag and drop it in there, and you'll see that, okay, look at that. It does change its size. So that's one way to play around with sprites and their sizes. I would say normally, let's not change these values, but if, push comes to shove and you have to use this asset and you have to get it bigger or smaller, you can play around with the PPU if you want. But, we're going to go ahead and say we did what we did, and we're going to delete that. Something else that's actually interesting with sprites, so this is a game object, these are my sprites, is it has this thing called a mesh type. It's tight or full rectangle. So this is important to know for 2D versus 3D. When I know it's a sprite, and you're like, well, how could it be different from 2D and 3D? I want you to think about it in terms of regular versus irregular. If you have something like what we have here, rectangles, most sprites come in some form of like a rectangular sprite sheet or some kind of sheet that's rectangular, right? So if you have something like what we have here that's fully, I say rectangular in shape, you should change the mesh type to full rect. This makes it easier on the optimization of the platform. Otherwise, if you forget, don't worry about it. What tight does is it looks for transparencies, and it changes the mesh to conform to those where there's like edges around your sprites. For us, does it matter? Not really. Is it tested? Not at all. But it is important to know that it does exist. So I'm going to change it to full rectangle. So let's look at, let's see, where do we want to start? Let's start off with sprite mode single, and let's do sprite editor. This is gonna be our introduction to 9 slicing. 9 slicing is like what it sounds like. It takes an object and it separates it into 9 different areas. Now 9 is the maximum, so let's see how we do this. So that's what this guy's for. We're going to click on our asset. We can actually get rid of this if we want. We're going to click on our asset. We're going to keep the sprite mode into, I believe it's single. We're going to go to sprite editor. And inside of sprite editor, let's see what we got here. Something that happens with sprite editor is this thing gets in my way, and that's why I usually maximize this. If you don't have this, you should have this. Maybe your students don't have this for some reason. Let's talk about an error real quick. If you don't have the ability to do sprite editing, you need to go to your package manager, and you have to make sure that you have the ability in your registry to edit sprites. And so that's going to be up here. Now, what they've done recently is they've made packages. So, for example, here's our 2D package, and inside of that, you'll have your sprite editor in here. Now, that should already be there because we opened up a new game. But for some chance, if they if they don't use the 2D core, I don't know what they would do, but if there's any reason why you can't edit a sprite and it's not working, make sure you have this package or these packages installed. All right, back here, sprite editor. Let's see what we got. There's this green looking box up here. We're going to drag this, and I'm going to try to match it up with that line. I'm going to take this one. I'm going to match it over on this one. I'm going to take these guys. I'm going to pull this one up and one left over here. And now we effectively have 9 sliced it. I have to click apply, of course, or else it won't apply. So we have this box, this box, this box, this. We have 9 different ones. And there's a reason why I chose this particular sprite, because what 9 slicing does, it allows us to stretch our sprites. And this is a technique that, if I want to use the correct terminology, allows you to reuse an image at various sizes without needing to prepare multiple assets. I'll show you what that means. So if we drag and drop our sprite in here, we're going to move a little bit quicker now. If I were to stretch it out, you'll notice that it loses that aspect ratio. It like stretches and compresses, right? We don't like that. I like my sprite to have purpose other than just to stretch it out. So what if we changed its sprite type, for example? So right now we have draw mode is simple. Well, if you change your draw mode, which, by the way, if you don't know how to get there, we have an object. Inside of that object's component called sprite renderer, there's a thing called draw mode. Remember, these are components. These are all components. Right now I have 2 components inside of my 9 slicing example. And I could call this whatever I want, by the way. So inside of my sprite renderer component, I have this thing called draw mode. We could switch that over to sliced. Now, this would not work had we not already gone back here into the sprite editor and 9 sliced it ourselves. It's already been sliced, and we applied it. So let's go back here, draw mode sliced, and let's see what happens. Interesting. Do you see what's happening? Let's take our scene and make it just a little bit bigger. What do you notice? It's keeping proportions. That's what's happening. So with our 9 slicing, we had this. I don't even want to call them thirds, but they are, right. This top third is like we've divided it into thirds. So what it's going to do, it's going to keep those proportions. So what is this useful for? This is useful for backgrounds. This is useful for floors. You could actually make a fence out of this too, which is actually quite surprising. So that would be sliced, and then if we move over to tiled mode, you'll see something different happens. So let's actually revert back. So this is our slicing. We're going to zoom out. We're going to add another one. We're going to change this one's draw mode to tiled, and we're going to expand that one as well. Now you might be wondering, what are these vertical lines? And that would be a product of my sprite editor. I probably hit something right on the dot that it didn't like. It's got some gray lines in it. It doesn't like those gray lines. I don't like those gray lines. There you go. Now they're gone. So there is a difference here between the two techniques. This one is just regular sliced mode, and this one is tiled mode. So you have to use whichever one you feel that you want for your project. And I would even have the kids come up with different examples, right? Like this could be like the last 15 minutes of the day. Can you come up with an example for why you would use sliced versus tiled, and give them a couple minutes, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes to brainstorm it together, and then everybody shares and they show the results on their screen. Well, the reason I would use this one is because I would like to keep the frame around this picture, right? Whereas the reason I would like to use this one would be because I like a background like outer space, and I want to be able to, whatever it is they come up with, right? And show those examples. But you can visually see that there is a difference. But knowing the difference is a little bit different too. Obviously, that's a redundant statement. Knowing the difference is whatever. So with slice mode, what happens is this center piece, I'm going to call it this center third and this center third. Move this one out of the way. This center third and this center third. What happens is it stretches those thirds out. So it stretches it there and it stretches it there. So that's not a big deal if you don't have an object there on the outside. Like you see I have that nice black center. That it doesn't matter. If I stretch it, you can't really see a difference. Or if you have an object that that's so large with the borders that compression and expansion don't really affect the quality of it. But if I had a border that I had to keep and I had to make sure that it looked good and it didn't lose resolution, I'm not going with sliced. Sliced is where you know that these 2/3 can be stretched and it's not going to have an effect on the way that the game looks. But that's why I'm using this picture. To show, well, if it does matter, if that border does matter, then I'm going to use tiled. And here's something cool with tiled too. There's two different tiles. There's continuous and there's adaptive. This one is adaptive. Let's do another one. Let's change its draw mode to tiled, and we're going to keep this one to continuous. So it might look the same, but there is a slight difference. And I'm actually going to use this one down here to show you as well. So with adaptive, there's this thing called a stretch value, and it has to deal with the size. Actually, if I hover over it, it tells you how much of the center portion will stretch before it tiles. So what exactly does that mean? So first I want you to look at the borders. As I'm stretching it, it starts to stretch. It hits that value. Boom, then it duplicates it, and it automatically fills into that space with that border. Whereas this one, it doesn't matter, right? Like this one's always going to have like perfect symmetry. There's always going to be a whole one here and a whole one over here in terms of like these little squares. But this one, you'll notice over here, I've cut off a little bit of that border. This is the difference, really, versus between continuous and adaptive. So let's see this 9 slicing technique done again. Let's wipe out our game objects. Let's take the 9 slicing guy, bring it in here, and let's do it again. So first off, let's 9 slice this bad boy. And this is where I would stop in my lecture, and I would say, you got 5 minutes maximum to 9 slice this. I would say that you should be able to do this in about 15 seconds or less. We'll say that because it's first time really doing it on your own, 30 seconds. So if you get it in 30 seconds, I would say you did a great job. If you get it under a minute, say you did a great job. You do at least in 5 minutes, you did a good job as well, right? But this is something that should be really easy and really quick. So how did I 9 slice it? What was that process? I got my guy in here. I'm stretching him around. I'm losing my, let's call it my aspect ratio. What did I do to 9 slice it? So the key is, before you even go over to draw mode and go to sliced, it tells you, might not appear correctly because the sprite is not blah, 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 blah. You didn't do anything, right? You did nothing. It's warning you, you haven't sliced it yet. So even though your draw mode is sliced, you still haven't sliced it. You have to go back to the original sprite. You have to make sure its sprite mode is single. Then you have to go to sprite editor. And then you have to define those boundaries. So I'm going to get that right there. Get this one just a little up. Click apply, exit out, go back to your game object. We're going to re-import it back into the scene. Oh, haha. I forgot to change its mesh type to full rectangle. Boom. And now we are working together. So let's do it again. Step 1, change its mesh type to full rect. Step 2, sprite editor. Take your lines, move them appropriately wherever you want. Remember, the center is what's going to tile. These guys on the middle sections are going to stretch out. Whatever's in these corners, we don't want to stretch. They're going to keep that same aspect ratio. Drag and drop it in. If you try doing it now, nothing happens. You're just changing its size. Go to draw mode, go to sliced. So once again, it stretches this middle third and this third right here. The corners aren't kept. So let's bring another one in here. Let's do it again. Draw mode. This time we're going to do tiled. This is going to be continuous. This is where I would ask the question, what do you think it's going to look like? I'm going to drag this thing straight out to the right. What does it mean to be tiled? And what does it mean to be continuous? And then what do you think it's going to look like? So, get an idea. Take a guess. Maybe even have the kids draw it out. I don't know, whatever you want. And as I stretch it, it makes a lot of sense. It explains the tiling. That's the centerpiece. And as it goes further beyond, it shows it again. It shows it again. This is the reusing part. It automatically reuses it for you. And it does that with the borders as well. So the same thing with these borders over here. It's reusing that sprite. So that's really cool. Now, for some reason, you can't really see the difference between continuous and adaptive on this one. And I'm going to have to guess that's mainly because of the size of this thing. But you can start to see it, right? Like, it stretches, and when it gets beyond the 0.5, boom, it gives you a third. And then it stretches again. Boom. So this is where like you could change that stretch value to like 0.25, for example, or 0.2. Let's do it again. Let's change that tile mode. We're going to change it to adaptive. Let's change it to something real small, like 0.15 or something. Yeah, this stretch value isn't too good with this picture. Yeah, I don't think I've ever really gotten it to look too drastically different with this stretch value. I have to have a much larger background here. But it makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. So this is up to this point, all of this is kind of on the exam. I'm going to bounce off of this for a second. So 9 slicing is 100% on the exam. And it's just about techniques and knowing how to set it up. And they'll actually give you pictures like this right here. And they'll say you have to know that its mesh type was full rectangle. You'll have to know that you have to click on Sprite Editor. So it could ask a question like, oh, I want to slice it. Which button do I press in order to edit it? And it'll be the Sprite Editor, right? If they could also have this picture, not here, this one right here, the draw mode. And they could say, what do I need to change it to in order for the 9 slicing to work or to be seen, or for the stretching, or whatever they could word it. And you have to know that it's the draw mode has to be changed from simple to sliced or tiled. And so that would be like on the actual exam itself, it would look like this. It would have a red rectangle around it here. It would have a red rectangle here. It would have a red rectangle here. And you'd have to click on that rectangle. And that would be like the question that you could come across. But you definitely need to know what's inside of the inspector and what to click on the inspector. I don't remember if all of this is on the exam. I couldn't tell you. But just knowing what the differences are, simple, tiled, and... what's that one? Simple, tiled, and sliced. Duh. We're on it. But the GUI is definitely on it. So after saying that, I'm gonna go back out here. This seems to me, when I first learned this, and I did the Unity Learn to find this out, it seems very specific in nature. In terms of, okay, you're using this for like a photo, you're using this for tiling a wall, you're using this for tiling the ground, for example. It's not a tile map because we would use a tile map for that, right? It seems very specific in nature. So that's why I have the floor as another asset to show you what else we could use it for. So let's drag and drop our floor in here. And let's actually 9 slice our floor. So we're going to change our mesh type to full rect. We're going to click Sprite Editor. And we're going to pull up our beautiful, beautiful sprite. It looks so good. But this time, I'm going to not use the maximum 9. So check this out. What I'm doing here is I'm applying, like, call it my pattern. This is my pattern. I have 2 patterns on this one. I have the top, we'll call it the top third, and the bottom 2/3, right? Let's click apply. Let's see what happens. So, once again, if I stretch it, oh my god, I lose my aspect ratio. That's because we forgot to change the draw mode to sliced or tiled. So what happens if we click sliced? Well, nothing really. Okay, well what happens if we click tiled? What happens then? Oh, look at that. Check that out. Now we're talking. So it's pattern repetition is what 9 slicing truly is used for. And I bet you could literally like spend an entire week going and explaining how different objects can be made using this 9 slicing technique. It's not just for backgrounds. It's, as you saw here, this one was for just the grass and the ground below it. I saw an example of somebody taking a fence, and the bottom portion of the fence, they turned into the pattern. They stretched it up, and the fence had longer legs, right? So it's a very powerful technique that I have not truly explored enough, but it seems cool. I'm going to stop here for a second. Are there any questions before we move on to the next part? I think I see a hand or something. Okay, well, nope. It said nope. We're good. By the way, I'm recording this in OBS. I'm not recording this in Microsoft Teams. OBS is way better. All right, moving on. Next up, so I'm going to delete that stuff. Now, we're going to zoom out. I think I zoomed way out. And I think I actually deleted my camera. No kidding. Okay. We don't even need the camera. But I guess we'll keep it. All right. So there's two things left to do today, and that would be animations and importing sprite sheets and slicing up those sprite sheets to create those animations. So the first thing I think we should do is let's look at sprite sheets, because I feel like it's a nice segue into the next part. So let's go ahead and let's get those assets. Oh, yes. Those assets are here. So I sent those assets to you. Go ahead and import the sprite sheet for, I guess the zombie sounds good to me. So we have 9 slicing. We have the Apocalypse character pack. We'll extract that. Make sure you extract it. I'm going to go in here. So in my assignment for the kids, that they have to do is they have to create. So here, for example, here's my sprite sheet for my zombie. They have to create 12 different animations. So with this one sheet right here, this would be the attack animation. If the zombie's facing you, facing away, if he attacks to the right or attacks to the left, you could create 4 animations out of this sprite sheet. So after you do it 12 times, it becomes like, honestly, after you do it by like the 3rd time, kids get really quick, and this turns from like a 30-minute assignment to like a 15-minute assignment. They're going to spend like 10 minutes doing the first 2, and then they'll spend 5 minutes doing the remainder 10. So let's do it. I'm not a fan of just keeping a bunch of sprites in here. So I'm going to create a folder called Zombies, because I like to make sure that I'm practicing naming conventions whenever I can and learning how to organize. It's the little habits that help out. Always try to develop good habits. Now, you don't have to do this, but I prefer doing this because the more you practice, the easier it gets. So take these bad boys. Come on, control. There we go. Put those in here. Zombies, perfect. Remember, there's 2 ways to get sprite sheets or to get assets into your project. Way 1 is drag and drop. And the other way is to right-click, import new asset, and then find it. But I already dragged and dropped it. Looks like I clicked something. Let's go ahead and let's clear that from the console. Okay. Let's get to it. Let's drag and drop this in here. Now, this was a trick that I told you guys before, in our first attempt ever of doing it, but I've lost my sprite sheet. How do I find it? How do I find it? How do I find something that I've lost in my Unity scene? So you click on it in the hierarchy, put your mouse in the scene, press the F button, and it'll find it for you. Perfect. So I dragged and dropped it in there. Oof, not good. That's definitely not good. We don't like that. So what we need to do is we need to fix this. We're going to delete that. Let's go ahead and left click our asset. And once again, same as before, this is the sprite. You'll see it over here. It has a size to it. It's 288 by 128. Same thing with the 9 slicing. All you had to do is click on the sprite, and you have this, the import settings all up over here. So what's going to be different about animations as opposed to just regular sprites, that like a coin or something, or like a non-moving cloud, for example, from Mario, is the sprite mode. Everything that we did for 9 slicing was sprite mode single, because we just want that one single object from it, from that entire asset called 9 slicing on this one. There's one single object in there. Well, with these, there are multiple. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. 9 times 4 is 36. I actually have 36 different sprites in here. And now I'm not even going to... We should probably say 32 because we don't care about what the name is. So that's where sprite mode comes into play. Now, this is an actual exam question as well. When 9 slicing, or when animating sprite sheets, or when you have to do something with sprite sheets, what do I need to change in order to edit a sprite sheet? And that answer comes down to the sprite mode. You got to change it from single to multiple. Then you can start editing it. So if I click on Sprite Editor now, it opens it up. It might not seem different, but the mode that it's in terms of editing, now assumes that we're going to have multiple sprites coming from everything that's on this screen. So that's where you now see the slicing occur up here. Now you could do automatic and try to have it slice it. I would never really recommend that. I would say let's do it ourselves, and let's change this grid to not cell size but by cell count. For me, that's much easier. By the way, if we were to do automatic, I'm gonna guess that this is gonna work. But if we were to do automatic, it would try to find the outlines of the sprite. Yeah, see, it tries to find the outlines of it. And that might seem good, but look what it did to front, look what it did to back. Look at the size difference between this one and this one. So their center points will be off, which is why I'm not truly a fan of the automatic. That's why I would much rather change the type to grid by cell count, or cell size. Either one is fine. If we do cell count, what it was 9 by 4, right? It was 9 columns by 4 rows. And you'll notice it's much better. It keeps the center point. This is good for us. That way we don't have to manually change everything. So we sliced it up, clicked apply. Looks good. So here's our sprites. They've been sliced up. We're going to exit out of that. We're going to try to exit. And now, I want to show you, if I click on this arrow button, look at that. All my sprites. And if you look on the bottom right here, right? Look how they're centered. Nice. If I were to click on the arrow for this one, it hasn't been sliced yet. That's why there's a difference here. This is all of these. This is the multiple happening now. From this one, we have all these individual sprites. Cool. Anybody have any questions before I move on and really get to the hardest part of the day, which is going to be how do we utilize these to make an animation? Because right now, what I'm looking at are 4 different attack animations. This can get complicated really quick, by the way. And here's what I want you to think about. And you know what would be very pertinent here, too, would be to go to, like, a Pokemon emulator. I would, if you could, right? You could play a Pokemon emulator and play one of the original games, like Pokemon Red, Yellow, or Blue or something. Or even pull up, like on YouTube or something, pull up like some gameplay. Pokemon Yellow. And pull up some gameplay.
Made before
or playing the Gen 1 games. So I'd fantasize
Right.
about how I.
This is where I think the core of like this lesson lies. Look at the way Pikachu is walking. Now Pikachu's facing to the left. Pikachu's facing up. Look at his walk. Now he has to the left. He has a different walk, right? Now that right there, to me, if we look at this walk animation, let's open it up. Let's change it to multiple. Let's change it to sprite editor to apply. And you'll see that we have a front, back, right, and left walking, right? So just with walking alone, you should have 4 different animations. How do you program that? How do you actually make that? The easiest animation to make is an idle animation. But after that, how does the game know which animation to choose? So this is where, like I said, it can get very complicated very quick. Let's actually take our idle multiple. Let's go to sprite editor, maximize it. We're going to slice it by grid count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. By 4, slice it up. Apply it. Perfect. All right, let's actually do this. I would much rather start with an idle animation. So let's create an object. You can actually drag and drop this in there. Zoom in on it. Now you have a zombie. Ooh, zombie. Now, also don't forget, you could change the size if you want, but we're not going to do that. Okay. This is where what we need is an animation. So, man, this is going to be a little bit hard to explain. So, you're going to have a bunch of different animations, and we're going to call those animation clips. Those animation clips must be managed by something. That something is called an animator. So that's what we are going to add as an animator. And an animator controller. Okay, so I'm actually gonna, I'm doing a little shortcut. I caught myself. Let's do it this way. This way is gonna be a lot easier for you guys to remember. So we're in this. Let's work in our assets folder. Let's right click inside of it, and let's go down to animator controller, and that's what we're going to create. And we're going to call this zombie. And what we need to do is we need to open up our animation window. And that's going to be useful for us as well. So let's open up our animation window. Let's see if it automatically pops up when we create a new animation. It does. Cool. This is where we're going to be at. You know, something else too. So I think I need to back up a little bit because I've been doing a lot of animations. This is easy for me to understand. But I have seen how confusing this can get real quick, and I have a way of teaching the kids a foundational way to remember how to do it. That way you'll never forget. And I think I should probably do it that way with y'all. So let's do it this way. We have our zombie, we have our original picture. What we need to do is we need to open up our animation window and our animation controller. If you're going to make animations, let's start in the animation window. So for me, I always like to have my animation window at the very bottom. I like to have it here. Some people like to have it on top. I don't care where you like it. Whatever happens is you, but I like to have mine in here. So what you can do is in these 3 dots up here, click Add Tab, and you can click Animation. I think for me, that's the easiest way of remembering how to start animating an object is let's find the window for animation first. Okay, I think that makes the most sense. So we click animation. There's our animation window. That's what allows us to create and edit those animations. Now, if you want an object to have an animation, you have to click on that object. So if I click on zombie, now I can start creating an animator and an animator clip for the zombie. So if I had another object here, just as an example, let's just call it game. Clouds, right? If I click on zombie and if I click create here, it'll create an animator for the zombie. If I click on the cloud and I click on create here, it'll create an animator for the cloud. So once again, I think this is the easiest way to remember the process for it. And once you've made enough animations and at least you've made at least a couple of them and you've applied them, it makes so much more sense. Then you can go and do like, oh, I'm going to go into my project window and I'll right click and I'll create a new asset and I need a controller on this one or I need an animation on this one. I think going to this step where you're just right clicking and creating and clicking these, I think it can confuse you and confuse your students. So once again, let's just open up our animation window. So there's these three dots over here, add tab, animation, and click on the object that we want to create an animation for. In this case, it's our zombie. So let's click create. Cool. We're going to call this zombie idle. And now we have our first animation clip. And here's what's cool. When we do it this way, if you look at our inspector, it already has an animator component to it. So instead of us creating the animator, attaching it, then creating a separate controller called zombie, which is what I started to do, and I said, hold up, let me rewind it, let me turn it back, let me stop this way. I actually started doing that, and I was going to drag and drop it over there. That's where I said, you know what, let's do it the easiest way first. And it automatically populates the component and the controller there for you. The controller is called zombie, and the animator itself is there. Cool. So, where are we at? So, well, let's look at it. We have this guy over here. This is our animation. We could bring this up if it makes you feel more comfortable. This is where we're going to live and die. Well, at least in this case, we're going to idle. Now, if we click this drop-down menu, this is where all of our clips are going to be. So if I wanted to create a zombie attack clip, if I wanted to create a, what were the other ones? Death and walk. Let's do those two. Zombie death, and add a new clip, zombie walk. Cool. Now I have 4 separate clips now. I have an attack, I have a death, I have an idle, and I have a walk. But there's nothing there to go along with it right now. This is where we have to add things to it. So let's go ahead. We actually will need to take our project window and take assets out of this. So I'm going to move this over, actually. I'm actually going to move my hierarchy over. And we are in, let's do zombie idle. That's the easiest one first. Go to our idle. Let's open it up. And we are going to select every one of them. Idle 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I left-clicked, held down Shift, clicked the last one with my left click. I'm going to drag it and drop it into the animation timeline. And if I click play, it works. Just very, very fast. Holy cannoli. That's very, very fast. That's very fast. Is there a tab? Nope. So here's how we fix that. We highlight them, left click, drag, and you see this right here? Let's drag it to like a second. So I'll do it again. Control Z it. I'm on my death. Now I need to get to my idle animation. All right, it's over here, zombie idle. Cool. Here's my keyframes. All right, I'm going to mouse click, or I'm going to use my middle mouse wheel to zoom out. That way I can get a full one. Is that a second? Could be. I see my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these are called keyframes. A keyframe. That's important to know what a keyframe is, right? You have to highlight them, left click, drag. You'll see this bluish looking bar. Left click, drag it, and hold it. Now if I click play, much better, much better. This is where the assignment, I tell the kids, you have to do this 12 times. All right, now let's go to our zombie. Which one? Do we have death? Nope. Do we have attack? Yep. Let's go to zombie attack. Let's drag and drop our first 7 in here. Let's get it all the way to a full second. Click play. Nice. Here's a little trick I've learned, by the way, to make animations look a little bit smoother. You can duplicate a keyframe, and it's about every 10 seconds, right? So I like to copy, Control-C, the first one. I take my little toolbar up here. I go to where, like right past the last one. And I duplicate it. And that makes the transition a little bit smoother. I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, I can understand the physics behind it, right? And I can understand the idea behind it. But I guess just discovering that was just a lesson I learned from watching just a lot of videos. Probably Bracky's taught me this. But that just makes your animations a little bit smoother. So just a little tip, not tested. If you want to make your animations just a little smoother, duplicate the first keyframe and put it at the end. And it makes that transition, once again, a little bit smoother. Okay, let's get that death animation. Well, here's the problem with the death animation. I don't have a sprite sheet for it yet. I mean, I have it, but it hasn't been manipulated. So let's change it. Oh, you know what? I'm going to put my hierarchy over here right now. Get rid of it. Nice. Okay, so how do we do that again? Here's our sprite sheet for death. How do I splice it up? What was the method? Right? This is good stuff. This is where the learning really occurs in class. All right, I've shown you guys. Now let's do it together, right? This is a we do now. So you change your sprite mode to multiple. And how do you even get to here? You have to click on the death sprite sheet, right? You have to click on the sprite sheet, and then you have to go to multiple. Then you have to click sprite editor. We go up to slice. Change the grid count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. By 4. Does it look good? It looks good. Click slice. Click apply. Exit out. Boom. We have our sprite sheet. And I think that means there's one more left. Yeah, so this is where I would definitely like let the kids know, because we only get, what, 45 minutes with them, that, you know, hey, listen, your end assignment is you're going to make a zombie walk animation, so whatever I'm about to do with death right now, you are going to have to do on your own to end the day. So you're going to have to take this sprite, change this mode to multiple, you're going to have to edit it, you're going to have to slice it up by the number of columns and grids, drag and drop them, and make the animation. So pay attention carefully if that seems like it's too much. Right? Just warn them. Always warn them that they're going to have to do this on their own. Because that's where real game design happens. All right. All right, so we have our death animation. Let's get our first 7 pictures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's expand that out to 1. Now, I could once again duplicate, Control-C, move over here. Control-V, and I could duplicate that keyframe. Let's play it. He's melting. He's melting. Oh my god. Okay, so we have an attack. We have a death. And we have an idle. And you know what? Just for the sake of it, let's do it one more time. Multiple. Sprite editor. Slice. Is 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2 Look at that. I guess right. Slice, apply, boom. Get it out, get your walking. Expand to a full second. I'm not going to duplicate it. I'm just going to do this. There is an obvious difference, though, between the first and the last one. It does seem like it jumps over. Cool. Any questions? Any questions at all? We've made 4 different animations, animation clips. We've on our, let's bring up our hierarchy again. Put this up here. In our hierarchy, we have our zombie. Our zombie has an animator, it has a controller, and it's referencing 4 different clips right now. Any questions yet? All we've done is make 4 different clips, truly. We haven't even figured out how to get these things to work yet. We've just, oh my goodness, we've imported sprite sheets, we've spliced them up, we've created 4 different clips using the sprites from those sprite sheets. We've even applied an animator to an object, but we haven't gotten anything to really work yet. Because once again, if I go back to my Pokemon Yellow playthrough, when the character looks left and they're moving to the left, that's the walking left animation. And if they walk to the right, that's a walking right animation. When they walk up, there's a walking up animation, walking down animation. So once again, what's the transition like? Right? If I let go of the button, do they stay in that animation, or do they return back to an idle animation? Right? These are all good questions. How do I even program that? How does the game know? So that's where we have to go to our controller. And that's this thing over here. And it sounds like exactly like what it is. So up here, we need to open up our animation controller. Actually, we're going to have to go to our projects, and we're going to have to click on our controller. That's this guy over here. So we have our controller. I guess you could also... Sorry, I'm trying to move things to make sense. If in our zombie, you could also find the zombie controller and double click it, and it would show up here. This is where all the magic happens in terms of how does it know what's going on. How does it know that there's a zombie death, a zombie walk, a zombie attack, a zombie idle? How does it know this already? Well, don't forget, inside of our zombie animator, we have a controller, and using that controller, we've already made those different animations. So I have to click on zombie, by the way. If that doesn't work, oh my goodness. If that doesn't work, by the way, if you can't click on this down menu, I'll never forget this student. They were so aggravated that they could not click on the down arrow to open up their animation clips. And I walked over and I was like, what's going on? And like, why are you getting so aggravated? He's like, I can't click on it. I can't find it. His issue was, which is what's going to happen to you all eventually, is you're going to click out of it, like what I did here. And I'll go over here, and it might not work. You have to click on the object in order for this stuff to populate. Now, I got lucky there that it worked. So if you click on clouds, it's not going to work, right? Because you have nothing there. But if you click on zombie, it'll start working. So make sure they're actually clicking on the object they want to work with. All right, back to the animator controller. It sounds like what it is. Now, on the exam, there are several questions on an animator controller. And a lot of it is going to come down to basic, I would say a lot of common sense, and it comes down to transitions and how transitions work and just knowing what you're looking at. So what are we even looking at here is a great question. All right. Let's see if I can actually pull everything in. That way we can zoom in on it. So this says that when the game starts, when it loads up, the first thing that it wants to do is to idle. Now, we could change that. We could say the first thing we want it to do is to walk. And so that would be a simple right click, set as layer default state. Now, the more complicated your animations get, obviously, you'll have more to do here. But listen, the questions on the exam are very platformer questions. They're like, it's like what you see here, except you wouldn't see death, you'll see a jump animation. And what should the transitions be like for jumping? So we start off this way. Anyways, so we have zombie idle. This is our clip. This is a clip, this is a clip, and this is a clip. How do I make sure that this clip actually works? And how do I get it to work? Okay, so when the game loads, it's going to immediately start going to the idle. From idling, I would like to be able to do what? I would like to be able to attack. I'd like to be able to play a death animation, and I would like it to be able to walk. Okay, so let's create those transitions. So we're going to right click, make transition, and I've done nothing. I'm just moving my mouse, and then once I hover over a clip, I can do that. Perfect. And now we have a transition to attack. We can do the same thing. Make a transition to death. We can make a transition to walking. Now, this is where the questions on the exam would be like, it would give you an example. It would say like, I'm creating a Mario game and I would like to be able to jump onto a platform. And while I'm in the air, I would like to be able to play a death animation. And at any moment in time, I should be able to play a death animation or something like that. It'll give you different concepts of what should happen when you're playing, like when you're platforming. So what's a cool assignment to do with the kids, and this is something that, like, honestly, I would do as a whiteboard activity. I would pull up a clip or have them play Super Mario Bros. As an emulator game. I would do like Super Mario Bros. Emulator online. And like straight up have them play Super Mario Bros. Now, we have ads, which is crazy. Kind of criminal. Who has ads on emulators? Cool. I would most certainly have them play this game. ZX. My goodness. And I would definitely have them remap these controls too. Right? But just play the first level and see how many different ways you can come up with an animation clip, or how many different animation clips are involved in this game. Right? So there's a walking, there's a run, there's a ducking, there's a jumping, and then you have Big Mario and you have Little Mario. And I would try to write out all of the different animation clips involved in this one. And then I would try to pseudocode it with the kids. Like, look at the jump animations. What happens when he's jumping, right? What happens when he lands? If he hits something right there, you see a clip where he hit that dude, and an animation happened. There's another animation. That's your death animation. So, like, there's so many different animations involved in just this game. You could technically spend an entire class period breaking down the different animations of Mario on just this one level. And it would be so worth it. And then to create this tree right here, even if you just have them write it out on paper, would be super, super powerful. Or just create the clips, create fake clips in here, and have them explore, like, when would this transition be effective? When would I turn this transition on? What does the game need to know in order for the death animation to occur? What does the game need to know in order for the jump animation to occur? For walking to occur? For attacking to occur? And so as for us, that makes sense. When walking, the character is moving, right? So I would have to have some kind of parameter, and that's going to be over here, where I'd have to create some kind of parameter where the game is registering that it's moving horizontally or vertically or something, right? Well, what's the parameter for death? Well, probably where the health of the character reaches 0. What's the parameter for attacking? More than likely, the parameter for attacking is what? If a single button has been pressed. And that button's probably like F or left click or the A button, right? So like that's what these transitions are going to help us with. These guys right here. We know what the final look is supposed to look like. That would be the animation. But how do I program that can get pretty tedious. So let's go ahead and let's create some parameters and let's finish the transitions and let's see if they make sense. So first off, the zombie should be able to go to attack mode at any point. The zombie should be able to go to walking at any point. And that's what these arrows, and death at any point. So after it's done attacking, it should probably go back to its idle animation, right? After it's going back from, if you stop walking, you should be able to go back to idle animation. I don't think that if you die, your character should go back to the idle animation. I don't think that makes sense. And if anything, you know what makes more sense to me is to take that transition off. And do you see what I'm about to do? Can you guess what I'm about to do? Where am I going to put the death animation? To me, it makes sense that at any point during the game, if something occurs and hits you and registers or it turns your health to 0, you should be able to die at any single point in the game. And I think with the animation clips that we've made here right now, this right here makes the most sense for us. Unless anybody here disagrees. Right? So let's go ahead and let's create some parameters. I think the death one makes a lot of sense, right? This parameter should be something like, and if we go over here, we have our parameters. By the way, you could take your animator and move it if you want. It makes a little bit more sense to you. You could take your hierarchy, because we're not really using the hierarchy a lot when we're dealing with... God, I'm trying to move it over here. We're not really using the hierarchy a lot when we're working in states, so I like to move that. Okay, let's go over here. All right, so parameters are super important when it comes to animations. It allows us to transition. That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, so we're going to start off with idling. Actually, let's go ahead and let's see if our game does that. Where's our camera at? I say we're not going to really use our hierarchy. Oh my goodness. Holy cannoli. This thing is massive. Can we take our... I want to see it. I want to see it. I need to move this. It makes more sense to me over here. Our zombie. And we need to zoom in on this bad boy. And we need to make this guy large. Transform. It's not going to make a lot of sense, but we're going to do it. There we go. Let's take our camera. Look, man, our camera can't even see it. Man, I wish I didn't change out that main camera setting. Like, look how large this camera is. My goodness. And where's our zombie? Shut up. Oh my god. Alright, where's our zombie's location? Let's change it to 0, 0, 0. Let's change our camera to 0, 0, 0. What am I doing? Just a reset. Yes, let's use our tools. Cool. All right. Okay. Of course. Well, at least I can see the animations playing on here. So the problem is that my camera is not on the same layer or something as my sprite. whatever. I just want to see the animation. And that's working. Cool. I really hate that this is happening. So if this ever happens to you, I would say, I'm sorry. Because this right here is a problem and a half. Okay, let's get to it. Go back to our animator. Cool. So, this is where we need to create parameters. There's a float, there's an integer, there's a boolean, and there's a trigger. Now, you can use whatever you want for your animations. Floating tends to be very useful. I like booleans for testing purposes. Integers make sense. So, like, if a zombie's health is what's your trigger, if health is equal to 0, you could say, all right, the integer is going to be health. And when you click on this transition, or you click on this zombie death, you're going to see transitions. Here we go, transition. And here's your condition over here. When health is less than, say, 0.01 or equals 0, whatever. So this one would transition when the health would equal 0. And here's our parameter. Okay, so zombie idling to zombie walking. What's our transition for that? So for me, that could be a float. What I am going to do is exit out of this. No, I'm not. I think the easiest way to test this is by creating a boolean for us. And I would say W, create another boolean for A, another boolean for, I think that actually works. Actually delete that. So we're just going to test out the animation. If I'm pressing W, then it's going to turn the boolean on. If I'm pressing A, it would turn the A on, and so on and so forth. Now, this is getting really complicated really quick. I understand. I could spend the next 20 minutes with you guys creating a script, attaching the script, and then pressing buttons and testing the animations, and we could get through it, and it could work. Or I can show you what I have the kids do, and what you should practice for the kids, because if I practice it, I'm not going to get anything out of it. But if you practice it, you'll get something out of it. And what's great about this is that it comes with a video. That way you can pause it and use it. So that would be here. So that would be the Unity tutorial importing sprite
Hello
sheet.
everybody, Chris here, and
I
in
will
this video
pause
I'm going
this.
to show
So this is something that I like to use. It goes over everything we did, setting up the animations. It has the different properties. That way you can play them. The only thing that this video doesn't do is get it actually working. And that's where I like to show people the Brackeys videos. Hey, listen, Brackeys goes step by step on here. It's not tested on the actual exam. What's tested on the actual exam is reading the animator, this thing right here. Reading this. Actually, that actually might be what was on the exam. Because I remember there was jumping, falling, and a die animation. So, you know what could be a cool assignment too? Is you pull up this picture and you discuss with the kids, like make some pseudocode. What would be the transition from here to here? Or you could take jumping, ledge hanging, falling, grounded, die, and entry, cut them up, and you could cover up these arrows, and you could give them the scenario, and you could say, now your job is to draw the transitions for me. At what point should you be able to jump, right? And so it makes sense that you can only jump if you're grounded. But from jumping, you should be able to ledge hang, or you should be able to fall. See, this is where it would make sense to me. The only way that, so this, I would even ask this, what's the one thing in here that you feel like could be programmed better inside of this state? Is that the die animation? From here, it shows me that you have to be grounded in order to play the die animation. So no matter what, your character has to fall on the ground and be grounded in order for it to play the die animation. These, by the way, you can ask whatever questions you would like to ask the kids from this, right? Like from falling, explain the different transitions that are occurring from falling. You can go from falling to grabbing another edge. You can go from falling to being grounded. That's it. Well, how do I get to falling? You can be ledge hanging and fall. You can be jumping and fall, or you can be grounded and fall. How do I jump? Well, you can only be grounded. How do I die? Well, you can only be grounded, right? Like these are all like kind of really cool questions to go with them. This right here is what is on the actual exam in terms of animations and creating the states. It's not actually going to ask you anything about, well, okay, well, here's our transition. Can you click on this and create the parameter for it? No. Because here's what we'd have to do. We would have to take our game. I would have to get a movement script for this zombie, and I'd have to apply it to here. I'd have to get the zombie moving. I'd have to give it different public variables, and those variables would have to be accessible by the sprite, by our new script, whatever script we put on here, right? I'd have to create some kind of movement script. I have to take that script. I'd have to put it on here. I would have to read these variables, and then it would have to be able to change those variables, or have to be able to access those variables and change those variables. Okay, that's a lot to do to get something to move. And now let me ask, like, if I put it this way, let's look at this, right? Let's look at this sprite sheet here. This is for attacking. Thank you. My movement script now would also have to have script for which animation to play depending upon the way that the character is facing. So for example, if you're moving up, you want to play the back animation. Think about that. If I'm moving up the screen, this is the animation that I need to play if I were to press a button. So there would have to be two things that would be true in this case. I'd have to be moving, and I'd have to be moving up, and then I would be able to play a particular attack animation, which, by the way, you could do, right? So you could have zombie walk. So we didn't even do that. Let's check that out real quick, right? If we go to animations, we have zombie walking. Well, what if you had zombie walk up? Right, as an example. And let's go to our project window. Let's put that bad boy over here. Which one's up? This one right here. Bring it over, bring it out, boom. Okay. You could have, at any point, the zombie could be walking up, and then create a new clip, zombie attack up. You could do something like this. The only way to attack up is if you are walking up. That's it, right? And that would be its own transition. So that's where I would do this. I would have a condition where as long as A is true, as long as it's attacking, the zombie attack up could work. So that's kind of neat. That's kind of nifty too. That saves you a lot of programming. It's not as much programming as like I was making it sound. As long as it's attacking, it will attack, right? Depending upon what state it's in, it will transition. So it should be able to go back here as long as what? What's the transition for here? As long as attacking is false. And what else would I probably want to be doing? I would probably want to have another condition where walking is true. As long as, and see, here's another thing, right? Like, which direction are you walking? Are you walking up? Is that a float? Is that a Boolean? Like, this is where, like, your own personal flair. So walking up is true. Oh my God, right? I would actually do this one. Where walking up is true. This is a lot. This is the advanced course, right? I don't go this far in depth into the game with them. The only time I really get this in depth with them is when we are actually making a game together. And I say, all right, guys, you are going to need walking animations. So let's download a walking animation. We'll go up, down, left, and right. And then I'll give them code. And then we'll make the conditions ourselves. But, like, that's a lot of time. Like, that's a week's worth of working with them and going through animations. And I would not suggest that right now. Because you guys are just learning how to do this. Right? So, like, to me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to get that far and crazy into it. But what I am just trying to explain, though, is that there are ways to control which animations that you have, and you can even do like animations within animations. And you'll see this in like Call of Duty, where they're like jumping to sliding to wall running, and there's so many different controllers that are interacting with each other at any given point. Cool. Which leads me to one final part of the day. It's 5:45. I'm gonna open this back up, and I'm gonna click on this one because I know my camera's working on this one. I want to show you guys how to do one last thing. So we have our sprites in this one. Let's delete it. Let's go ahead and right-click and insert a 2D object, a sprite, and let's make a circle. Hi, circle. Here we are. And don't forget, you can move your circle wherever you want. Can you create animations in your own in terms of can you get them to move? So think of an NPC that moves. And this is where I go back to Mario. You have your... Do I have it up still? No, I don't. So let's do history. Super Mario Bros. If we look at the animation... Okay. Oh, I died. I was trying to turn off the sound. All right, let's break down the animation for this. I think it's called a Goomba. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Please, please, please correct me. It's Z. Man, this is like cross-handed. Okay, so look at the animation of this guy right here, right? He has technically two different animations. And same thing with this sprite. Actually, that one's not. That one's just sitting still. I need a Goomba. Okay. So look how they're moving, right? They're moving along a line. That right there is in itself an animation if you think about it. It's a movement, right? So by themselves, they have like this animation where like one foot's getting bigger than the other. It's going back and forth. You don't really see anything different with the eyes, but what are they doing? They are still moving back and forth. And as the game progresses, you're actually going to see different objects have different animations like that as well. You might see something in the background moving, right? So like what I'm talking about is like a movement type animation. So like what if you have something in the background doing like a bouncing ball effect, right? It's moving up and down. How do you create that animation? And instead of having one big sprite, so like our sprite would have to be like this big. It would have to take up the size of how we want it to move, and every pixel would be changing, right? Well, what if I just want just this object to move, right? This object is itself the sprite, right? It's a circle. I don't want to create one large border and have like different pixels colored and then transparent. No, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't want to sprite sheet this thing. I just want it to move. That's another type of animation, is a movement of the entire object itself, is what I'm trying to get at. So let's go to our animation. Once again, how do we start? We click on our object. And if these aren't here, let's close that tab. Let's close that tab. You want to create an animation for something. Click on the object. Let's find our animation window. That was the 3 dots, add tab, animation. Let's create a clip for it. And we're going to call this our circle. It looks like I already created a circle animation. So that's cool. So now our object is our circle. It has an animator controller. And that animator controller is called Circle 1. It's called Circle Animation. Let's create a new animation, and let's call it Bouncing. Cool. So we have a bouncing animation. We have to get this thing to move up and then move down. Now, I have tried working with the record button and recording animations. I do not like it. I do not recommend it. I would much rather it be perfect, because I can use positions, rotations, and scales. I can manipulate those myself. I can have the exact numbers I'm looking for. If I record something, if I do something and record it, it's very amorphous and jittery, and it just doesn't follow some path. So I hate recording. I would much rather add a property. In this case, we're going to add a transform property, and the property that we're going to add is position. And now you'll see that I've created 2 keyframes automatically. Its position is right here when I expand it. And if I click play, nothing happens. That's fine. That's what we want. Its beginning matches its end. And it's always going to do this for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right dead set in the center. And we're going to create a new property. We're going to move this up. And we're going to add a keyframe. And what position are we at? We're at about 4.05. Perfect. So let's go back to the original. Looks like negative 4.3. It goes all the way up to 4. All the way back to 4.3. And I'm going to do that again, so that way you can see it. I'm going to go to here. Wherever I want this thing to be, I move it. Okay, I want it to bounce that high. I'll move this line over to that point. Now, this is where you can move it by hand, or you could change its scale over here. 4. Or whatever. Sheesh. Oh, yeah, you gotta click on it. Boom. What? It's just not working. There it is. And it automatically interpolates for you, which is very cool. So this means you could technically create whatever type of bouncing animation you would like. Now remember this question. RGB, which one, red, green, or blue, relates to the x-axis? Which color relates to the y-axis? Which color relates to the z-axis? Now, in 2021, you don't see it over here. In 2019, which is what the exam is on, you will see it. The x is going to be red, the y is going to be green, and the z is going to be blue. Look at our transition over here, or our movement property. Which one is this one called? The move tool. Yeah, just like freaking Photoshop. The Y is in green. The X is in red. This is important. Because on the exam, I have heard of different questions being asked about animations. I personally had one with animations, and it was like, along which axis would the ball be bouncing, or along which axis would you be jumping, something along those lines, right? And so you have to understand that the y-axis is vertical and the x-axis is horizontal. The z-axis, well, for 2D, it really just determines order. But for 3D, it makes a lot more sense, right? So for us, don't forget that when we're bouncing for this ball, we're doing the Y position. But if I was going to have this ball rolling on the ground, it would be along the X position. And that's something that's important to emphasize with your students as well when you're doing this activity with them. Once again, let's click play. Cool. So now what would be next? If you are a developer and you're sitting there and you're looking at this and your boss comes by and he goes, well, that doesn't look like a bouncing ball. That looks like a pendulum more than a bouncing ball. Like, what do we need to change? How could we change this? Like, how could we make this into a bouncing ball? And this is where, like, most of the time I would have kids be like, okay, well, let's add more keyframes. And let's make sure that we change where this object is located. So, like, let's go to 5 seconds, and we'll add a keyframe here. And then we'll go up to 10 seconds, and we'll add another keyframe up here, right? And if we click play, and then they go through the whole thing adding keyframes. And I'm like, well, that seems like a good idea, but that seems to me to be like a waste of time, because you have to actually calculate at that point what are all the Y positions using mathematics and formulas. And that I'll give you that equation. It's 1/2 GT squared. That's what your Y equals after a certain amount of time. So you know what? Go for it if you want to go mathematics. Or we could look at its curves. And this is where I think, like, the hardest part of the entire exam, next to lighting, comes down, is knowing what curves are. So let's maximize this a little bit. These are the curves we're looking at. And this is where red, green, and blue is very important for us. What's red? X. What's green? Y. What's blue? Z. So the Z should never change. And it looks like, in this case, our X isn't changing. Well, that makes sense because we're only bouncing up and down. So that should be a constant. So this is where you actually will see the ball changing. So this curve is how we are going to get our ball to look like it's bouncing. We have to affect this thing. So while it's playing, you can actually move it. Let's zoom out a little bit. You get to go down, right? This looks a lot better, actually, if I go down. But we're going to stick to up. Or down. Oh, it doesn't matter. And what do these things do? Well, these are what we call tangents. So no matter what I do, if I move this point, it's always going to keep this tangent nice and flat on top. It's what we call a smooth transition. It's a smooth transition. If I were to left click this and change it, you see what happens? And then look what happens with the ball. Now, if you're like me, the first time you really start looking into this, you might feel overwhelmed. You're like, oh my God, how am I supposed to know what curve this is supposed to look like? And then, let's say I do know what it's supposed to look like. How am I supposed to get it to look like that curve? And what is Unity going to ask? Or like, what's going to be on the exam? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's go over to the Unity manual. We are done with this section. We are done with, well, this is basically where we're at here, right? Now, I've given you guys these links, which explains what they are, right? These are called dope sheets, by the way. This is where the curves are. And you'll see it talks about adding different types of curves and all this stuff. But this right here is where the magic is. is editing the curves. And if we scroll down, these are the editing tangents. You could be asked any type of curve on the exam, and you have to know what type of curve it is. So you have to know what a tangent is, and that's why I love this GIF. This GIF it shows you the smooth transition between pre-anchor point or keyframe and post. That's what this is. The left side is pre-point, this side is post. You could just call it left side, right side. Honestly, that's the easiest way. Left side, right side. And this is what we call a clamped auto, meaning that no matter what you do, it will automatically make it nice and smooth for you. Right? So let's look at our guy over here. If I right-click this point, you'll notice it's on automatically clamped auto. What happens if I clicked auto? Nothing really different, right? So what is the difference? Clamped auto. Can you see the difference? There's a very slight difference. Do you see it? And if I right click it, look what happens. It changes it to auto. Oh my God. Okay, so here's the deal. Clamped auto always makes this smooth transition point where this right here, it's nice and smooth at the very top. It's always flat. The moment I change it, it changes it into auto. Well, in this case, free smooth, right? Because I changed the right tangent. But if I do this, change it to auto, look what happens. That curve doesn't stay flat. Now, it is a slight difference. I know. I get it. Right? So, the difference between clamped auto and auto really is just at the point, at that keyframe, it's the most perfect. Clamped auto will be like the perfect transition. That slope is 0 here. And then there's free smooth, there's flat, and there's broken. Flat makes a lot of sense. No matter where I put it, it stays flat. Broken makes a lot more sense if I do right tangent. What broken does is it separates the left from the right. It allows you to have a different in to the out, so to speak, right? I can set the left side differently than the right side. So let's go back. Automatically means left side basically equals right side. Broken means what? It means you can change left, you can change the right. And we like that, and that especially for a bouncing ball, right? So, here's what's cool. Let's change this into a bouncing ball. I believe that what I had to do in the end was I had to go to this anchor point, I had to go to right tangent, and I had to go to free. Was it free? Oh God, what was it? I was experimenting with this earlier. It wasn't constant. Constant means that it stays that same. So watch this. Constant makes a lot of sense when you see it on paper. I think if I was going to try this, I'd actually have the kids come up with animations where I would use constant. Ah, yeah. I remember. I did left tangent here. I did this. We're going to go back. Yeah, I remember now. Clamped auto. So I right-clicked this, and I'm telling you, I just experimented. Literally, I was like, all right, I got to figure out a way to make this thing look like a bounce. I changed it to this. Oh, I didn't want to do that. But it doesn't look like it's bouncing though, right? It looks like it's bouncing off of the ceiling as opposed to bouncing off the ground. So we'd have to figure out a way to get it to bounce on the ground instead of the ceiling. This is fun. I think this is where the fun occurs in game dev design. Because to me, that would mean that we probably have to do the opposite. We probably have to do something like this. And get this section looking more like this. Left tangent free. And I'd probably want a smooth transition here. Hey, look at that. It looks much better, doesn't it? Yeah, see, now I'm just having fun. Change how high it bounces. Ooh, that's not good. That actually doesn't look too bad for a little small bounce, right? It looks like it slightly stops at the top, which it should, right? A bouncing ball does stop at the top of its path. It accelerates down and then accelerates after the initial bounce. That doesn't look too bad. And then I could change it, bring it back up. I have to zoom back out because I'm increasing its size, and then I have to change these. Now it looks bad again, and now I don't like it. I think you guys get the idea at this point. On the exam, you have to know what these different ones are. You have to know that this is broken. Before does not equal after. Broken linear. Also, broken means that the tangents don't line up as well, right? So, like, this is one single tangent. It's one single line. One single line. That would not make it broken. This line goes up, and then it goes over, so it's broken. This line goes up this way, and then it goes down this way. It's broken. This one is just obviously broken constant. Like, first it's here, then it's up here. They're like, if anything, it's like infinitely up and down. You know, like, there is no tangent. It doesn't exist. It's asymmetric. It's asymptotical or whatever it is. Doesn't exist. It's infinite. But once again, you have to know the different types. And I think if you play around with it, like with what I did with the kids, or not what I did with the kids, but with what I did with you guys, we created the ball, and we try to get the ball to bounce, and we play with these curves. I think it will make a lot more sense that way. And I did this with mine this year, and just showed him that, and it was very, very easy on the exam. But I don't even know which questions they got. There's so many different questions on this thing that's really hard to know what's still on there versus what's not on there. So yeah, that's it for this particular lesson. It was a lot. There's still so much left to be desired. Like, it would be really nice, honestly, if just one lesson, or like you got to spend like a whole week in my classroom, and the whole goal of the week was to get your guy moving and walking in 4 directions. And then after that, get him sprinting in 4 different directions. And I think that would be a great goal for a week of work, you know, assuming we only have 45 minutes a class period, and it takes 5 to 10 minutes for Unity to load, right? But yeah, that was it.